Tonight, I'll share with you 3 true stories from people who worked the night shift, alone, alert, and terrified. And hey, before we dive in, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments. It's always amazing to see how far these stories travel in the dark. I was 19 when I started working the night shift at a small gas station just outside of Laramie, Wyoming. As a broke college sophomore trying to balance tuition and rent, pulling all-nighters behind a cash register didn't seem so bad. I figured I'd be studying most nights anyway. The store rarely saw more than a handful of customers past midnight, and I liked the quiet. It was just me, a coffee machine humming behind the counter, and the soft buzz of fluorescent lights above. It was my first solo shift. The manager, Carla, had trained me for a week during the daytime. That night, she handed me the keys, smiled, and said, "Just don't fall asleep, and call if anything weird happens." By 11:30 p.m., the place had settled into an eerie silence. I was restocking candy bars near the back when I heard the front door chime. The automatic bell was supposed to be soft, but in that dead quiet store, it sounded like a gunshot. I turned around quickly. A man had just entered. He was tall, at least 6'3", broad-shouldered but wiry, like someone who used to be muscular and had let himself wither. He wore a heavy brown coat despite the mild spring night, with the collar turned up to his ears. His hair was long, graying, and greasy, sticking out wildly beneath a beanie, but it was his eyes that froze me. He didn't blink, he just stared. "Evenin'," I offered nervously. He didn't respond. He walked slowly past the counter and stopped in front of the refrigerated drinks section. But he didn't open anything, didn't browse. He just stood there, hands buried deep in his coat pockets, facing the glass doors like he was admiring his own reflection. I watched him from the counter. My heart was thudding louder than the buzz of the lights overhead. Something about him was wrong. I couldn't explain it. He wasn't doing anything illegal, just being silent and still. But that silence felt violent. After 5 long minutes, he turned around, looked directly at me, and started walking toward the aisle near the snack shelves. I held my breath. He stopped again. This time, he stood between the racks of jerky and potato chips, staring at the rows like he was lost in some dream. I grabbed my phone and unlocked it under the counter. I wasn't going to call 911 over a creepy customer, not yet, but I wanted to be ready. He stood there for almost 15 minutes. The clock above the register ticked past midnight. I kept glancing between the man and the security camera feed on the monitor behind the counter. Every second he stood there, motionless, staring down bags of Doritos like they were priceless artifacts. My anxiety crawled further up my spine. I cleared my throat, hoping maybe he'd snap out of it and walk out. "Let me know if you need help finding anything," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. No answer, not even a glance. Another 10 minutes passed before he finally moved. He didn't pick anything up, didn't say a word. He just turned around, slow as syrup, and walked toward the front entrance. My stomach unclenched slightly. Maybe he was finally leaving. I stayed behind the counter, pretending to scroll on my phone, but watching him through the reflection in the glass doors. He stopped just before exiting, turned his head, and stared at me again. We locked eyes through the reflection. My breath caught. There was no emotion in his face, no curiosity, no confusion, no expression at all. Just those cold, fixed eyes. It was like he was watching something behind me. Then, without a sound, he pushed the door open and walked out into the darkness. I waited. 10 seconds, 30, a full minute. No engine, no headlights, just silence. I stepped out from behind the counter, walked cautiously to the door, and peered outside. The parking lot was empty, except for my old Toyota parked under the flickering overhead light. The man was nowhere to be seen. I listened for footsteps, car doors, anything. But the night had returned to stillness. I exhaled sharply and locked the front door. Whatever that was, I didn't want a second round. My shift ended at 1 o'clock a.m., and I had just under an hour left. I figured I'd tidy up, count the register, and be out of there as soon as possible. 30 minutes passed with no incident. I even managed to convince myself I'd overreacted. Maybe he was just mentally ill, or high, or lonely. People wander into gas stations at night for all sorts of weird reasons. I shut off the backroom lights, grabbed my bag, and headed for the front. When I opened the door and stepped out, the cold night air hit me like a wall. The wind had picked up. The only light in the lot was the flickering lamp above my car, and even that seemed dimmer than usual. I walked briskly, keeping my keys gripped tight between my fingers. Then I saw him, standing directly in front of my car. No sound, no warning, just him again, facing me about 20 feet away. My breath stopped, my skin prickled all over. He hadn't left. He'd been waiting. I froze. The man didn't move, just stood there, bathed in the weak, stuttering glow of the overhead light. His face was still expressionless, but there was something in the way his shoulders were hunched slightly forward, like a predator waiting for the right moment. I stepped back instinctively. My keys slipped from my fingers and clattered to the pavement. That was when he took one slow step toward me. I turned and ran, back through the glass doors, back behind the counter. I slammed the deadbolt shut and reached for the phone beneath the register. I dialed 911 with shaking hands. The dispatcher picked up after one ring. 911, what's your emergency? There's a man outside the station, I whispered, breathless. He was inside earlier just standing around, and now he's blocking my car. I think he was waiting for me. Are you inside the building now? Yes, the door's locked. Stay where you are. Officers are on their way. Do not engage with him. Is he armed? I don't know. He hasn't said a word. He just stares. I peered over the counter, trying not to let the blinds shift too much. He was still standing there, but now he was looking directly at the store again. He saw me go back in. He knew I was watching. Then he moved, fast. He darted across the lot toward the entrance, and I backed up, heart pounding in my ears. The glass door rattled as he yanked at it, realizing it was locked. He pounded once with his palm, then leaned forward and pressed his face to the glass. His breath fogged the window, but I could still see his eyes, wide, unblinking. He just stood there, breathing on the glass, his face inches away from the barrier between us. The dispatcher was still on the line. Ma'am, are you okay? Officers are en route. They're about 4 minutes out. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I was staring at the man's coat. His left hand was in his pocket, but something metal gleamed for a second under the overhead light when he shifted. Long, slim, reflective. Was that a knife? I backed away again, crouching behind the counter and gripping the phone like a lifeline. Every second felt like a full minute. Then, just as suddenly as he appeared, he walked away. No rush, no panic, just a slow, silent retreat into the darkness at the edge of the lot. By the time the cops arrived, he was gone. They searched the area, questioned me, pulled the security footage. One of the officers offered to follow me home, but I just shook my head and told them I wasn't coming back. Not ever. I quit the next day. I told Carla I'd take my chances waiting tables or working morning shifts somewhere else. I didn't care how good the pay was or how quiet the nights could be. After that night, the silence wasn't comforting anymore. It was waiting. I still think about that man sometimes. Who he was, why he picked me. What would have happened if I hadn't dropped my keys or locked the door just a few seconds later? Some people say evil wears a mask, but sometimes it just wears a coat and stares. Back in 2021, I was working security at a 24-hour storage facility just outside of Lexington, Kentucky. It was one of those suburban places surrounded by nothing but woods, gas stations, and a lonely diner that only truckers seem to know about. Most of the time, my shifts were dead quiet. I'd clock in at 10 p.m., grab a cup of coffee from the break room, and spend the next 8 hours monitoring the cameras, checking logs, and occasionally walking the perimeter. Easy money, or so I thought. I was 32 at the time. I'd done a few jobs before this, warehouse work, mall security, but this gig was by far the most uneventful. The kind of job that gives you way too much time to think. Sometimes I'd get lost scrolling through my phone or reading crime novels between checks. That night, just after 4 o'clock a.m., I was finishing up a round of checks on the monitors. I had about 2 hours left before my shift ended. I was halfway through a bag of pretzels when something flickered on camera 6, the one pointed toward the rear parking lot. I leaned in and squinted at the grainy black and white footage. Someone was out there. A man. He was walking along the edge of the property, right where the exterior lighting started to fade. He wasn't a tenant. I knew all the regulars who came in during the night to grab things from their units. Most wore uniforms or had marked vans. This guy didn't. He looked out of place, wearing a black bomber jacket, jeans, and a dark ball cap pulled low over his face. He moved slowly, glancing around too much, pausing at certain spots like he was checking locks or looking for a blind spot. I tapped the screen and switched views to the next closest camera, camera 7, which had a better angle of that corner. Sure enough, the guy knelt beside one of the older units near the back, partially hidden by the fence line. He kept fidgeting with something in his hands. Bolt cutters? Screwdriver? Whatever it was, he wasn't supposed to have it. I reached for my radio and made sure it was working, then checked my belt for the small flashlight and collapsible baton. I didn't want trouble, I never did, but it was part of the job to intervene or at least investigate. And something about this guy didn't sit right. I slipped on my jacket, grabbed my flashlight, and stepped out into the night. The cold hit me like a slap. Early March chill in Kentucky doesn't play around, even at 4 a.m. The gravel crunched under my boots as I made my way toward the rear parking lot. I kept to the shadows, careful not to alert whoever this guy was. But with the place being as quiet as it was, I knew he probably heard me the second I stepped outside. As I turned the corner around the last row of units, my flashlight beam caught movement. There he was, crouched next to Unit 214, halfway through prying open the latch with what looked like a flathead screwdriver. He froze when the light hit him, then stood up slowly, like he wasn't surprised, just sizing me up. "Hey," I said firmly, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "You don't belong here. Step away from the unit." He didn't say a word, just stood there, both hands visible, the screwdriver still in one of them. I could see him better now, mid-30s maybe, stubble on his jaw, rough skin like he'd been living hard. There was something in his eyes that immediately made me uneasy, like he didn't care how this was going to end. I said, "Step away." I repeated. My right hand rested on the handle of my baton, just in case. That's when he took a single step toward me and smiled. "Place ain't even worth guarding," he muttered, voice low and raspy. "You don't get paid enough for this." That set off every alarm bell in my head. "I already called the cops," I lied. "They're on their way." He tilted his head as if weighing the truth of that. Then, in a flash, he lunged. It wasn't dramatic. No shouting, no drawn-out fight like in the movies. Just a sudden movement, the clang of metal hitting pavement, and me stumbling back, trying to get my footing. I managed to get the flashlight up, swinging it hard into his side. He grunted, reached for my jacket, and shoved me into the wall of a unit. The cold metal stung my back, but adrenaline was doing its job now. I brought my knee up into his leg and jammed my elbow against his chest to push him off. We both fell to the ground. For a moment, it was a tangle of limbs and fists and gravel. He reached for the screwdriver again, but I slammed the baton down on his arm before he could grip it fully. He let out a yell, half pain, half rage, and tried to scramble away, but I got my knee into his back and pinned him just long enough to yank a zip tie from my belt. "Don't move," I barked, breathing hard. He didn't. Whether it was exhaustion, pain, or just the realization that I wasn't going to let him walk away, he stayed flat on the gravel, breathing heavy, staring at the dirt. I grabbed my radio and called it in. This time, I wasn't bluffing. "Dispatch, this is Ridgefield Storage. I've got an intruder detained behind the lot. Male, mid-30s, attempted break-in, minor altercation. Send officers ASAP." The dispatcher acknowledged, and I sat back on my heels, keeping my eyes on the guy. Neither of us said a word. The cops showed up about 10 minutes later, longest 10 minutes of my life. 2 cruisers pulled into the lot with their lights off. Smart move, considering how unpredictable this guy could have been if he hadn't already been pinned. One officer came toward me while the other covered the man still face down on the gravel. I stepped back, hands raised slightly. He tried to break into one of the units. We struggled. I got him restrained. The officer gave me a short nod and knelt beside the man, checking for weapons. They pulled the screwdriver from under his jacket and a small folding knife from his back pocket. "Anything else on him?" the second officer asked. "Not that I could see," I replied. They cuffed him and sat him up against the unit door. That's when I really saw his face. Blood on his lip. One eye starting to swell. But he didn't look scared. He looked amused, like this was just another night for him. As the officers questioned me and took down the details, one of them ran the guy's ID through their system. Turns out his name was Ryan Cole, and he wasn't just some random thief. He had a record stretching back nearly 15 years. Burglary, armed robbery, assault. He'd been in and out of state facilities, most recently released on parole just 8 weeks earlier. And here he was, breaking into units in a quiet little storage yard, probably thinking no one would notice. One of the cops told me, "You're lucky he didn't bring a gun. Guys like him don't usually stop with storage units." That stuck with me. I gave them the security footage, filled out a report, and watched them drive off with him cuffed in the back seat. He didn't look back. He didn't have to. That empty smirk he gave me during the fight, it's burned into my brain. My name's Kyle. I'm a junior at Northern State University, and to keep myself afloat, I work the graveyard shift at a 24-hour gas station off Route 46, just outside of town. The pay isn't great, but it's quiet most nights. Too quiet sometimes. That particular Thursday night started off like any other. Dead silence, stale coffee, and me thumbing through my psychology textbook behind the counter, trying to prep for a quiz I had the next day. It was about 1:15 a.m. when the first guy came in. Mid-30s maybe, tall, wearing a red hoodie and jeans, his face half covered by the hood. Nothing too strange at first glance. He went straight to the back of the store where the drinks were. Didn't say a word, didn't look around. 2 minutes later, the second guy walked in. He looked older, maybe late 40s, wore a tan work jacket, and he reeked of cigarette smoke even from across the room. What struck me was that he gave a quick glance toward the guy in red, but didn't say anything. They didn't nod, didn't acknowledge each other. At first, I thought they were just two random customers. Then the third one walked in. This guy was different. Heavy-set, mid-50s, wore a black beanie and a long coat, even though it wasn't that cold out. He held the door open longer than necessary, like he was expecting someone else to follow. But no one did. Now, 3 guys in a row at that hour isn't unheard of. We get truckers, drunks, and insomniacs. But there was something off, not just about them being there, but about how they moved. They didn't pick anything up. They didn't look at shelves. They just loitered. The man in red stood by the coffee station, staring at the empty pots like he was lost. The one in the tan jacket paced slowly along the candy aisle, hands in pockets, eyes fixed on me. And the big guy? He stood near the fridge but didn't open it, just watched the other two. I could feel my stomach knotting. They weren't talking to each other, but I could swear they were coordinating something silently. I cleared my throat and asked, "Can I help y'all find something?" None of them answered. The guy in the red hoodie turned slightly toward me and said, "You alone in here, man?" That hit me like a gut punch. I forced a smile. "Nah, manager's in the back," I lied. "Stockroom." He didn't respond, just went back to staring at the empty coffee pot like he was waiting for something. I tried to stay calm. I'd dealt with drunk customers, a guy on something one time, even a petty shoplifter. But this felt different, more calculated. The guy in the tan jacket finally picked up a candy bar, then put it back. Then he did the same with a pack of gum. He wasn't browsing, he was stalling. All the while he kept glancing toward me, then toward the big guy by the fridge. The big guy still hadn't moved. Meanwhile, the one in the red hoodie was now at the corner of the counter, way too close. He leaned over slightly and said, "So, you work here every night?" I laughed awkwardly. "Nah, just filling in." He muttered and stepped back again. That's when the man in the tan jacket walked up to the counter and asked, "Got any phone chargers back there?" I pointed to the rack near the window. "Aisle by the door, far right." He didn't even look in that direction, just stared at me a moment, then walked the opposite way. At this point, my adrenaline was spiking. These guys weren't here to shop. I didn't know what they wanted, but it sure as hell wasn't a phone charger or a snack. I glanced down at my phone under the counter, hidden behind the register, and texted my roommates. "Yo, 3 sketchy dudes in the store acting weird AF. Can one of y'all swing by like now?" I hit send and prayed at least one of them was awake. The guy in red suddenly asked, "Do you lock the doors at night?" I blinked. Just after 2 a.m. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "That's smart." Then he casually leaned over the counter looking behind it, like he was scanning what was back there. I stepped back instinctively. Seconds later, the front door opened, and my friend Jordan walked in, not alone. All 3 of my roommates had come together, probably sensing something was off from my message. The moment those 3 guys saw them, the tension shifted. The man in the tan jacket mumbled something under his breath and walked toward the door. The big guy followed without a word. The man in the red hoodie stood his ground for a moment, then shot me a look I'll never forget. "I guess we'll come back when it's just you next time," he said. And then he walked out. My roommates stood there silent for a beat, watching the 3 men pile into a silver SUV parked along the side. The engine started up, and they peeled out of the lot, tires squealing. I stood frozen behind the counter. Nobody said a word until Mike, the one who always cracks jokes, finally broke the silence. "Bro, what the hell was that?" After the SUV sped off, the silence in the store was deafening. My roommates just stood there, eyes darting between me and the parking lot. I tried to play it off like it was no big deal, but my hands were still shaking. I pretended to tidy up the counter just to keep them from noticing. "Dude," Jordan said, "that one guy looked like he was about to climb over the register." "Yeah," I muttered. I thought he was going to do something too. We hung around a few minutes just in case they circled back. I offered them some leftover taquitos and Red Bulls from the back fridge, my way of saying thanks without saying I'd just about peed myself. Eventually they left, and I finished my shift. But I didn't forget that look, the one the guy in the red hoodie gave me before leaving. It wasn't frustration, it wasn't disappointment, it was a promise. The next few nights, I was jumpy as hell. Every time the door chimed, I flinched. I kept the baseball bat under the counter a little closer, started locking the door early. Management didn't like it, but I didn't care. I didn't call the cops. What was I gonna tell them? 3 guys came in, bought nothing, and creeped me out. They didn't technically do anything illegal, but I know they weren't there for chips or gas. One night, about a week later, I thought I saw the same silver SUV slow roll past the store around 3 a.m. No one came in. It didn't stop, just crawled past and disappeared into the dark. That was the last straw. I quit 2 days later, told my manager I had too much on my plate with school. Truth is, I just couldn't stomach being in that place alone anymore. Not after that night, not after that look. I still think about it sometimes, about how those 3 guys pretended not to know each other but moved like they'd rehearsed it, about how they didn't steal anything because whatever they were planning, they didn't get to finish it. And worst of all, that guy said he'd be back when it was just me. I made damn sure that never happened. If you've made it this far, thank you for keeping me company through the night. If you enjoyed these stories, a like would mean a lot. It lets me know you want more. And if eerie tales in the dark are your kind of thing, consider subscribing to Mr. Rainy Night. We've got many more stories waiting. Thank you, and good night.